Good day. Welcome you all back to the course research methodology. We are going to look into measurement scales today. So one important tool by which we collect data is a questionnaire. Or else if you have got a structured interview schedule, we need to have some measurements, like some unit of measurement. So we need to understand what different types of scales are available. So as of now, we know yes or no. If there is a question, then we know only yes or no. But we told you in methodology, we quantitative analyze data. We need to have some data. If it is only yes and no, what happens is yes will bear the number 1 and no will bear the number 0. So you will not be able to find out the central tendency, or else measures of dispersion, only with this two, like, so we need to have different types of scales. There are other scales also by which we need to measure the perception of people. So when we talk about types of measurement scales, we have got arbitrary scales, we have got differential scales, or you call it as thrust-tone type scales. We have got summated scales or Likert type scales, and we have got cumulative scales, we have got factor scales, and we have got multidimensional scaling as well. So we will be looking into everything one by one. And there is another method of coming out with the scaling as well, which we will be going through in this session. So when we select a particular measurement scale, like we need to understand what type of scale will be appropriate for the measurement. So selecting and constructing a measurement scale requires careful consideration of several factors that's going to influence the reliability, validity, and practicability of the scale. So we need to bear in mind, because in methodology, we cannot cut everything into bits and pieces. We need to have a clear-cut idea right from the management dilemma to the research question, the research gap. Then we need to consider the hypothesis, the objectives, what we intend to find results. So all these things have to be kept in mind, and we need to keep in mind whether the tool what we are going to collect data is reliable. If we do it again, do we get the same results? So is it reliable? Is it valid? Is it measuring the content which it intends to measure? So is it practically possible? So you need to keep that in mind. Particularly, practicality comes about with respect to time frame. Supposing you wanted to collect samples more than 1,000. So how long will it take to collect 1,000 samples? Because the response rate for if you take mailed questionnaire and all, the response rate is less than 5%. So when you determine the sample size, or when you determine the type of scales what you're going to use, we should keep in mind whether it is practically possible or not. Supposing 10-point scales and 7-point scales, normally we don't use it in the Indian context. We go in for either 3-point scale, or many times we go in for 5-point scale. Okay, so the first and foremost thing we need to keep in mind when you select a measurement scale is the objectives, the research objectives, the response type, the data property, the number of dimensions you are trying to measure. So if you go in for multidimensional scaling, then we need to look into the number of dimensions. Then we look into whether it's balanced or unbalanced, whether it comes as forced or unforced choices, forced distribution, or if it comes, it can be open-ended question or it can be closed-ended question. So if you give an option of not applicable, then they can come out of that. Okay, number of scale points I told you, like 3-point scale and 5-point scale works out better in different contexts. But then If it is for if you need to measure very precisely, then people go in for 7-point scale and 10-point scale. And we need to look into rate as error. Like if you take 5-point scale, the major error what you face there is the central tendency. Okay, so or else the leniency. So sometimes rater's error may also be there. So all these factors have to be considered before coming out with what type of scale you are going to use for the instrument where you're going to collect data. Okay, then the another important thing is I was talking to you about perception. As far as management study is concerned, it's more of perception based study. So what do you perceive in your mind? What is the thought process you have got in your mind? The thought process what you have got in mind is called as the attitude. Okay, predisposition of behavior is called as attitude. Behavior is something which is exhibited. Okay, supposing you wanted to find out what type of brand they purchase. So if you want to find out exactly about the behavior, then you should do it by observation. You have to go to the shop, multi-branded shop, and you should watch what brand people are thronging for. Like right from the morning till evening, 8 hours. If you sit and observe, then out of 1,000 customers who came in, how many of them opted for one particular brand? What you are thinking about? Okay, so but then this becomes very cumbersome. This sort of observation method becomes very cumbersome. So what you can do is you can straight away ask people what is their intention. What is their intention regarding purchase of a product? Or there are certain unobserved things, like just going and asking for the brand alone is something which you could measure. But why he goes and asks that particular brand? Okay, what are the factors which is influencing him to ask that brand? If you wanted to know about that in depth, then we have to measure attitude. Okay, so many of the studies are perception based study only. So now that is why we call the terminology attitude scale. So it is a tool prepared for the purpose of measuring people attitude to an issue, which is called as attitude scale. It is designed to provide a valid or accurate measure of an individual's social attitude. So attitude scaling is the process of assessing an attitudinal disposition. So that's what I told you, no? It is a predisposition of behavior. So using a number that represents a person's score on an attitudinal continuum ranging from an extremely favorable disposition to an extremely unfavorable disposition. Okay, so you can ask them, like how far you buy a particular product. Then they could say very often, occasionally, rarely, never. So 5 point. Okay, so extremely favorable, very often is extremely favorable. Okay, never is unfavorable, extremely unfavorable. So you can actually measure this sort of thing by the attitude scale. So scales in business research are generally constructed to measure behavior, knowledge, and attitude. So attitude scales are among the most difficult to construct actually. So we use attitudes to develop the understanding of scaling. Okay, now we need to now understand the relationship between attitudes and behavior. Okay, specific attitudes are better predictors of behavior than general ones. So the strong attitude, strength is affected by accessibility or how well the object is remembered and brought to consciousness. So how extreme the attitude is or the degree of the confidence in it. Or it becomes better predictor of behavior than weak attitudes composed of little intensity or topical interest. So you can actually come out with the brand recall and all. By That's how you measure the strong attitude. Then direct experiences with the attitude object when the attitude is formed during repeated exposure or through reminders. They produce behavior more reliably. The cognitive based attitudes influence behavior better than affective based attitudes actually. So affective based attitudes are often better predictors of consumption behaviors. So using multiple measurements of attitude or several behavioral assessments across the time an environment improves the prediction. Okay, so that's why we collect more samples. We collect people from various segments. So when you start drafting the questionnaire, you will ask different things. So you include in all age groups. You will include both genders. Then you will include people coming from different geographical locations. Okay, so we will include different sorts of people from the entire population. The influence of reference group and the individual's inclination to conform to these influences actually improves the attitude behavior linkage. Okay, so for this we need to have interpersonal support, urge of compliances, and sometimes what happens is there may be peer pressure. So attitude actually changes. The attitude of an individual changes when it comes to exhibition of behavior in future based on the reference group's influence. Okay, that's about the scales. Now we come to unit 12, where we have got the scaling techniques. Here, um, we classify scales in another different methodology way, which is called as nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, and ratio scale. Okay, four scales you need to keep in mind. You should never ever forget about that. So now comes nominal scale. The nominal scale is simply a system of assigning number symbols to events in order to label them. So it provides convenient ways of keeping track of people, objects, and events. One cannot do much with the numbers involved. Okay, so you just assign numbers to certain things. That's all. Just give numbers. So accordingly, we are restricted to use mode as the measurement of central tendency. So we can't measure central tendency, or you can't measure dispersion. Okay, supposing we ask them what color you like, they may say red, yellow, green. So you give numbers to each one, but you can't come out with the measures of central tendency like mean, median, and all for that, because it's absolute number. Okay, so chi-square test is the most common test of statistical significance that can be utilized, and for the measure of correlation and contingency coefficient that can be worked out for it. So nominal scale is the least powerful level of measurement. It indicates no order or distance relationship, and it has nothing um, going to do with arithmetic origin as well. So a nominal scale simply describes differences which exist between the by assigning them to a particular category. And thus counter data. The scale weighs any information that it might vary with the degrees of attitude, skills, and understanding. Next comes ordinal scale. The name itself implies it is in an order. The lowest level of the ordered scale that is commonly used is the ordinal scale. The ordinal scale places events in order, but there is no attempt to make the intervals of the scale equal. But they have got an order. Rank order represents ordinal scales, and they are frequently used in research relating to qualitative phenomena. The student rank in his graduation is one of the best examples of an ordinal scale. Thus, the use of ordinal scale implies a statement of greater than or lesser than. So this one is this fellow is higher than to him or lesser than him. That's what we could find out without being able to state how much greater or how much lesser. Supposing you wanted to find out why a person has bought a commodity. So you may have different criteria for that. You can have price, you can have the product durability, you can have after sale service, you can have guarantee period, you can have texture. Okay, so for all these things, what you can ask is, if you ask them to rank, they can rank. Supposing you got five criteria, then they will rank 1 to 5. So that is what is called as ordinal scale. But for the next level, interval scale. In interval scale, what happens is like you can ask for only one item. Um, the price is an important criteria which influenced me to buy this particular commodity. So if that is a statement for which you have got strongly agree, agree, partially agree, disagree, and strongly disagree. This is an interval scale. Okay. So in interval scale, intervals are adjusted in terms of some rule that has been established as a basis for making the units equal. So strongly agree and agree. There is the difference is 1 unit. Okay. So the interval scale provides more powerful measurement than the ordinal scale. For interval scale also incorporates the concept of equality of intervals. As such, this is the most powerful statistical measure that is used for analyzing the data. Now here, mean is the appropriate measures of central tendency what we are using here. So when you come out with the scale itself, you can understand what type of test, I mean, what type of test and what type of measurements you are going to have. So while standard deviation is again the most widely used measures of dispersion here. So the product movement correlation techniques are also appropriate. The generally used test for statistical significance is t-test or f-test. So f-test is ANOVA. Okay. The next one is the ratio scale. The ratio scale has got an absolute or true zero of measurement. So the term absolute zero is not as precise as it was once believed to be. We can conceive of an absolute zero of length, and similarly we can conceive of an absolute zero of time. Time taken. So there is zero time also. So the ratio scale represents the actual amounts of variables. So measurement of physical dimensions like height, weight, distance, and all these things are ratio scale. Okay, then the other type of classifying the scale is single item versus multiple item scale. In single item, a scale format that collects data about only one attribute of an object or a construct, a single item scale, and which has got only one item which is measured, as I've already told you. Multiple item, the name itself implies they are applied. It is difficult to measure people attitude based on only one attribute. For example, you ask a person whether he is satisfied with Indian Railway. So he may say that he is overall I am satisfied. But there are many factors by which I am dissatisfied. In such cases, it is impossible to capture the complete picture within overall one question. So the number of scales have to be developed and can be measured a respondent's attitude towards several issues from most favorable to most unfavorable situation. Then we have got comparative versus non-comparative scales. Comparative scale is which the participant evaluates an object against the standard using numerical, graphical, or verbal scale. A smiley also is there, no? Like you can use something like that. A comparative scale is ideal for such comparison if the participants are familiar with the standard. So the comparison of your previous hair dryer's performance with the new one. Non-comparative scale, such as seamless object scale independently of others. They evaluate only one object at a time, and for this reason, non-comparative scales are often referred to as monodic scales. Okay, so now when we do measurements using scales, we tend to err. To err is human. Like so, the measurement also will have some error. But the error should be within limits. So the measurement should be precise and unambiguous in an ideal research study. This objective, however, is often not met within entirety. As such, the researcher must be aware about the sources of error in the measurement. So if you take Amos, analysis of movement of structure, we have got only goodness of fit indices and error. That's all we will find. So the error should be within limits and the goodness of fit indices should be above the level expected. Only two things are there in that. Okay, so likewise, error is an important thing which you need to keep in mind. So the possible error during measurement is from the respondent, from the situation. That's what I told you, no? Halo effect, central tendency, leniency, all these things are the errors which the respondent makes. Situation, like sometimes they may be in a hurry-burry situation. So situation is an error. Then the measurer, like If it is a structured interview schedule, then the interpretation or the way what interviewer takes will be something different. The instrument also sometimes will be confusing. Supposing you use double barreled question, then it will lead to different type of result. So in fact, there are three major considerations one should use in evaluating measurement tool. The first and foremost thing is test of validity. So validity refers to the extent to which a particular test measures what actually it wishes to measure. So we have four types of validity: content validity, criterion related validity, concurrent validity, and construct validity. And we have got test of reliability, whether the tool is reliable or not. It talks about the accuracy and precision of a measurement procedure. So we normally measure it by Cronbach's alpha value in SPSS. So the alpha value for HR related questionnaire should be more than zero point 0.8, and Nunali accepts actually more than 0.6 as well in marketing study, where the sample is very heterogeneous in nature. Then test of practicability. Practicability is considered the wide range of factors like economy, convenience, and interpretability. Supposing now I sit down south in North India, down in South India, but I wanted to know about what's happening in North India as well. So the mobility becomes a great problem, like, and likewise the amount which you spend for the traveling, all these things might be a very important thing, whether it's practically possible or not. And you wanted to collect data from the topmost person of an institute, then getting an appointment from that person becomes very troublesome. Okay, so you need to fix up an appointment, and then you have to do follow-up calls, get us that get a slot, and then you can go and meet him for an interview. So we need to look in whether it is practically possible within a stipulated time. Okay, so thank you for the patient listening. We'll meet you in the next session. Until then, this is Dr. Rajini signing off.